Ms. Peterson, do you have a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, get started whenever you're ready.
2 weeks, 11 rooms, 20,000 minutes, 0 evidence. Members of the jury, in any ordinary trial, this is the part where I stand before you and I talk about how flimsy the government's case is. Normally, I talk about how shaky the evidence is, or how many holes there are in the investigation, or how unreliable the forensics are, but I can't do that today. Because in this case, members of the jury, there was no evidence to examine. There was no investigation to assess, absolutely 0 forensics to analyze. Despite the fact that they had 2 weeks of Mr. Ocean's time, 11 hotel rooms to search, and 20,000 minutes to try and find a moment, a single moment, where Mr. Ocean was in any way linked to the crime. And yet they came up with 0 evidence. Think about that. Because the government brought a charge of grand theft and conspiracy to court today. They're making serious accusations, and they've saddled themselves with a hefty burden. In fact, they've saddled themselves with the highest burden in our legal system. Now, I'm going to address each charge in turn, starting with the grand theft charge. Now, grand theft, element 1. The government had to prove that Mr. Ocean actually stole something. Well, let's think about what evidence he had. There were no fingerprints in, on, or even near the vault. No fingerprints near the phone used in the heist. No fingerprints near the bag of money that was recovered, or in any of the thieves' hotel rooms. Now, the government also had to prove that it was valued at more than $1,000, that it was owned by somebody else, and that Mr. Ocean took that item without the owner's consent, with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of it, and that he moved it, however far. Now, members of the jury, to prove that, they have nothing. No DNA, no hair, no fingernails, no skin, nothing. The government stopped short at the very first prong. Now, the government would have you believe that Mr. Ocean is a criminal mastermind, that he checked on into that hotel and wrote down his real name, gave them his real license, and used his real credit cards. A criminal mastermind, but he didn't think to even use an alias. That's because the unvarnished truth is, members of the jury, that despite the bells and whistles and the great showmanship, the government couldn't even clear the first bar. They couldn't show you that Mr. Ocean's property wasn't his. And at that point, it becomes irrelevant whether or not the property was valued at over $1,000, or whether or not it was somebody else's, or if Mr. Ocean even moved the money. And to that point, members of the jury, I haven't seen any paper trails here today. I mean, where's the cash that was stolen? I'd like to see evidence of wire transfers, offshore bank accounts, I mean, something. But the government didn't do that today. Well, they didn't do it because they couldn't. They couldn't show you evidence that Danny Ocean stole money because he didn't have that stolen money in the first place. Simple as that. All right, so the government couldn't hack the grand theft charge, but that's all right. I've got time. Let's take a look at their conspiracy charge too. There were a total of 11 hotel rooms to search, 11 rooms worth of evidence to collect. You see, they had to prove that the defendant agreed with one or more individuals to commit grand theft, and that one or more of the conspirators took at least one overt act to further that crime. They couldn't do that today. And that's because they have zero forensics to suggest that Mr. Ocean visited any of the thieves' hotel rooms or that any of them visited his. The agents on this case didn't find phone records, texts, or emails to show that Mr. Ocean had ever even contacted any of the thieves, much less planned out this whole thing. They can't point to a single conversation. The special agent can't relay a single sentence to you spoken between the group of thieves and Mr. Ocean. And for over a year before the heist, Mr. Ocean was in prison under constant surveillance where every move he made, every letter he sent, every call he placed was watched. He went from one high security place to another. I mean, Vegas hotels are infamous for their high surveillance. And yet in all that time, the FBI couldn't scrounge up one video clip of Mr. Ocean entering the thieves' hotel room or even talking to them, much less talking to them about this crime. And the last time I checked, members of the jury, conspiracy requires communication. Unless the prosecution, of course, is alleging that the defendant had powers of telepathy, there's just no way to prove that he was communicating or conspiring with the thieves. So once again, the government falls short at the very first element. Members of the jury, we know what the government had to work with. Danny Ocean was there for 2 weeks. They had a total of 11 hotel rooms to search, over 20,000 minutes of Mr. Ocean's time to try to find a single moment unaccounted for. And yet they came to trial today with zero DNA evidence, zero digital evidence, zero forensic evidence linking my client to this crime. As far as I can see, members of the jury, all they've got is one biased accusation. That, members of the jury, isn't just reasonable doubt. The reasons to doubt are overwhelming, and this isn't an acquittal by a technicality. You see, members of the jury, Mr. Ocean walked through those doors to this trial an innocent man. Not much has changed since. See that he walks out those doors the same. Find him not guilty. Thank you.